let me go back to fertilizer, okay? And this is kind of one of my pet peeves about fertilizer, is that Scott's has done an excellent job marketing their fertilizer as a brand, because a lot of times people will ask me, what brand fertilizer should I get? And really the brand makes no difference. Fertilizer is fertilizer. And Scott's has done an excellent job marketing themselves as, the name that you look for on a fertilizer bag. However, the actual ingredients they have in that bag are really not good for your lawn. I brought a bag of Scott's here so that you can see. And this is a Scott's, Scott's Bonus S, what, a lot of people will use on their lawn. I went into a Home Depot yesterday, as a matter of fact, and as soon as you walk in the front door, there's this huge display with all these pallets of Scott's fertilizer, and they're talking about, they have this really pretty picture of, well, if you fertilize your lawn twice a year, it'll look this good, and 4 times a year, it'll look this good, and 6 times a year, it'll look this good, and that's true to an extent, but let me kind of explain to you how that works and why that's not a really good thing to go on. Way down at the bottom corner of this bag, kind of where you can barely see it, there's 3 little numbers. And those numbers right now on this bag are 29010. What those numbers represent is the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that this bag of fertilizer contains. So I think this is a 17.224 pound bag. Okay, let's just make it easy and just assume that we had 50 pounds of fertilizer here. If we had 50 pounds of fertilizer, that means there would be 14.5 pounds of nitrogen, no phosphorus, and 5 pounds of potassium in this bag if you put out 50 pounds. Now, why is that not good? Well, nitrogen is the main product that causes the grass to grow and turn green. I mean, if you put nitrogen on your lawn, within a few days, man, it'll be dark green, and you'll be mowing that thing, twice a week for the next month. I mean, it'll just grow. And you'll think, wow, this is really great. I've got this beautiful lawn, and, it's so thick I can barely push the mower through the grass, and it's just, probably during that time, your neighbors are going to be coming up to you and going, man, what'd you do to your lawn? Your lawn looks so great, and people will be driving down the road honking at you, and I mean, everything, you're just, you're going to be like elated at how nice and beautiful my lawn is. And if you do that, if you do what they say 4 or 6 times a year, boy, that's exactly what will happen. However, what they don't tell you is that whenever you put the fertilizer on there and you're stimulating top growth, you're doing that at the expense of root growth. So the grass is putting all of its energy into growing leaves and runners and all that, and it's looking really nice on the surface, but if you could see underneath the ground, the roots are just getting fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. So what happens is, after 3, 4, 5 years of doing, following the Scott's plan of, fertilizing 6 times a year, 4 times a year, whatever they recommend, then you end up with a top-heavy lawn that feels like carpet when you walk on it, and you can barely push the mower through it, but it has hardly any root system, and it just ends up collapsing. Have you ever heard people say, well, if you have centipede grass, you got to replace it every 6, 7 years? Well, that's one of the reasons that that happens, is that's a perfect example of over maintaining a lawn where, you know, and again, unless you come to a workshop like this, or you do a little bit of research on your own, or you talk to the county extension agent, you're not going to know. You know, you're going to walk into Lowe's or Home Depot, you're going to see that pretty little sign, and you're going to go, oh, well, if I want a nice lawn, this is what I need to do. And that's what so many people do, but it doesn't, not for this area. You know, I think Scott's is based in Ohio. And probably if you did that up in Ohio with Kentucky bluegrass, it would work fine. But here with centipede, St. Augustine, zoysia, it is not a healthy thing to do, to fertilize your grass that much, that often. I've gone to some lawns to look at them and to, you know, kind of diagnose a problem. And what I found is is that the lawn, literally, the grass is so thick that I can grab it with my hands and literally, and the grass is so thick and the roots are so shallow and so few, I can literally grab the turf and peel it back like a carpet. And it just almost sounds like Velcro, you know, when I do that, because it has been fertilized, so it has so much nitrogen has been put on the lawn for so many years that there has been so much top growth developed but no root growth that there's just no, you know, there's nothing left for the roots and the lawn is starting to collapse. Now let me talk a little bit about nutrition in general for the lawn, because as I said, the Scott's here is 29-0-10, so basically it has 29% nitrogen, no phosphorus. Most of the fertilizers that you will buy over the counter from Lowe's, Home Depot, from your big box stores will have little or no phosphorus in them, and there's a reason for that. The reason is down in Central and South Florida, there's an abundance of phosphorus. There's too much phosphorus in the soil. As a matter of fact, if you put phosphorus on the lawn down in Central and South Florida, again, you can have the same problem we have up here. If you fertilize too early, it'll contaminate the aquifer and run off into bodies of water and create ecological problems. We don't have that problem here. The problem that we have is there is no nutrition in the soil. I mean, we just have sand. There's no nitrogen, there's no phosphorus, there's no potassium, there's very little of anything. Okay, so phosphorus is a very important, it's one of the 3 major nutrients that the grass needs to be healthy. So if you put down a fertilizer that has no phosphorus in it, then you're denying the lawn one of its major nutrients, which it has very little to access in the soil. So what you need to do when you fertilize is you need to fertilize with a fertilizer that has phosphorus in it as well as potassium. Phosphorus is a very, it does a lot of stuff. The plant uses it in a lot of different ways to grow and just do its process. So you need phosphorus. So you need to look for a fertilizer. What I have here is an example. This bag came from Ewing. This is a bag of fertilizer, and it's 14-14-14. Okay, so what that means is basically whether a fertilizer is 14-14-14, 10-10-10, 6-6-6. As long as the numbers are all the same, it means it's equal amounts of phosphorus, of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And that's the kind of fertilizer that we need in this area, because our soil doesn't have any nutrition in it at all. So you need that 1-1-1 ratio. Now I recommend the 14-14-14 because it just gives you a higher percentage of everything when you buy the bag. I mean, you'll pay about the same amount of money for a 10-10-10 as you do a 14-14-14, but you'll just have to put less of it out because it's more concentrated. So that's, that is the kind of fertilizer that you need to be putting on your lawn, is the one that has a 1-1-1 ratio. Okay, Let me just pause there. Any questions or anything? Yes, sir?
Is that true? So you want that much phosphorus in a centipede? Or you want a lower number?
Well, for centipede phosphorus, again, if we've done hundreds of soil samples in this area, and without exception, every single soil sample that we've done is low on phosphorus, and then we send those samples in, and then they send back recommendations for centipede. Most lawns are centipede, and there's always 2, 3, 4 pounds of phosphorus that are recommended to bring that soil level up to what it should be for centipede or any other. Now, centipede is supposed to be a low maintenance grass, and what I mean by that is you're not supposed to use a lot of nitrogen on centipede, because centipede is very reactive to nitrogen. It will nitrogen and water. If you water and apply nitrogen to centipede, man, it'll do what I mentioned. It'll just become a thick mat of carpet, and you don't want to do that to centipede. Phosphorus, on the other hand, won't stimulate that top growth. It'll help it do other things, but it won't so much stimulate the top growth. Yes, sir?
Does that ratio 14, 14, 14 vary, say when you move? I live in Crestview, 30 miles north.
Yeah. What you probably want to do is take a soil sample and just have it analyzed, because I would imagine that up in Crestview, the soil conditions, because there's farming up there. I mean, they can actually grow stuff up there, whereas down here we can't. So I would recommend that you take a soil sample and find out kind of what the nutrition elements are there, and go based on that, rather than all the soil sampling we've done has been right along the coast here between Gulf Breeze and Fort Walton. I haven't done any up north in Crestview and Milton, that area, so I would recommend that you do that. Yes, sir.
Where is the pH factor here, since it's all sand?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What we'll do, let me talk about pH here for a moment. Get the question a lot of times. How often should I put lime on my yard? Why and when should I put lime on my yard? What lime does? Lime is not a nutrient, but what lime does is it raises the pH of the soil. So why would you want to raise the pH of the soil? What benefit would that give to the grass? What pH does, what the proper pH does, is it allows the grass to easily absorb the nutrients that are in the ground or the fertilizer that you put on the grass. If the pH is too far off, if it's way way off, and usually, again, out of all the soil samples that we've done in this area, I can't remember a single one that's ever been too high. In other words, that it's been too basic. They're all too acidic. The lower you go, the lower the number on the pH scale, the more acidic it is. And any of the ones that we have, all of the soil samples that we've done, if they're not correct, then they're too low. So the way you correct a low pH soil is to add lime to the soil. And unless you do a soil sample, there's really no way to tell exactly where the pH is in the soil. You really need to do a soil sample and find out if you need lime. Now, if you do need lime, it takes about 50 pounds per 1,000 square feet of lime to change the soil pH by 1 point. So generally speaking, soil pH, the grasses in, the warm season turf grasses that we have, the centipede, St. Augustine, they like about a 6.5 to 7 pH. 7 is neutral, so anywhere from neutral to slightly acidic. So if, say, you have a pH that's 5.5 and you want to raise it 1 whole point, you're going to need about 50 pounds of lime per 1,000 square feet on your lawn. So, I mean, just to extrapolate that out, if you have 1/4 of an acre, which is about 10,000 square feet, then you're going to need 500 pounds of lime to apply to the yard to raise your pH 1 point. So it seems like a lot. That's 10 50-pound bags is what that works out to be. Now when you apply that, the lime does not instantaneously change the soil pH. It takes about 2 or 3 months for the lime to be absorbed by the soil, to do its thing, and for the pH to actually change. So if you applied lime and a week later took another soil sample, it would probably read about the same, because there wouldn't be enough time for the for the pH to change in the soil. You need to give it about 2 or 3 months to do that. And one one interesting factor is the pH. The pH scale is actually based on a logarithm of 10. So a pH of 5.5 is actually 10 times more acidic than a pH of 6.5. And a pH of 4.5 is 100 times more acidic than a pH of 6.5. And I've seen some pHs of soil samples that we've done down around 4.2 or 4.5. They can get that low. So in that range, that soil is 100 times more acidic than what it should be. And you're going to need, a 4.5 pH, you're going to need to move it 2 whole numbers, so that's going to require 100 pounds of lime per 1,000 square feet to change that pH.
And how long does that last?
Good question. You should, if you do that, it should be good for several years. You shouldn't have to add lime more than once every 3 or 4 years, and you can do soil tests. Now, the thing that moves the pH down usually is if you have trees in the yard, oak trees, pine trees, you have a lot of leaf drop. As those leaves decompose, then that's what changes the pH of the soil. If you have a yard, say for instance one of these yards that it's a newer home, they cleared the lot completely, brought in 3 or 4 feet of sand, planted the yard on top of the sand, then you probably don't have a problem with pH. But in a yard that's been established for a long time, that you've got a lot of shrubs and or you've got a lot of trees and stuff planted in the yard, oak trees especially, that you drop a lot of leaves, and those leaves have been worked into the soil over the years, that's the kind of yard that probably has a pH issue that would need to be checked. Yes, sir.
Where do you get the soil samples done?
Good question. You can, what you can do is you can go to the county extension agent. They have like a satellite office down here at the county courthouse extension on 98 in Gulf Breeze. They have soil test kits, and then you can get those soil test kits from the county agent and send them off to the University of Florida. And then the University of Florida will check all the, I think the county agent can do a pH test by itself, just a pH test at their facility. But if you want the pH along with all the nutrition analyzed, then you'll need to send it to the University of Florida and let them do it. And they'll send you back a printout, and it'll tell you how much lime and how much of each nutrient you need. When you take a soil sample, the best way to do it is take just little samples from around the yard, like in front and back, probably 3 or 4 in the front, 3 or 4 in the back. Take them about 2 or 3 inches deep, so about where the root zone of the grass is, and then just put them in a bag and kind of shake it up just so you can get an average of everything. I mean, it would be very unlikely that the front yard and the backyard would be so different that you would need to treat it differently. So unless you have an extraordinarily large property, several acres, just a normal residential lawn, you would treat the same front and back.
If the grass is more acidic, like you say, what is the result on the lawn?
If the soil is more acidic, generally speaking, the lawn just will not thrive as well. Very rarely would you see the lawn decline, actually get sick and decline from having a soil pH problem. But what what you'll find is the grass just won't thrive the way it should, and it won't be able to uptake the nutrients that it needs. The lime can be applied any time of the year. There's not one ideal time to apply it. So any time during the year you can take a soil sample and apply lime. And if you do that, be sure when you purchase the lime to get the pelletized lime and not the powdered lime, because powdered lime is just very hard to put out in a spreader. And if you're putting out several hundred pounds of it, it'll just be really hard to put it out in the powder form. But they do make a pelletized form that is like a fertilizer that you can easily put out with a spreader.
You have to water it in right away, or?
You don't have to water it in right away. It does need to be watered in eventually, but it'll break down and just kind of mix in with the soil. You don't need to water it in right away.